the biggest moment where I said, this is it, I've done it, and now I can live full time as a singer, was when I got my first Joe Cocker tour. Yeah, that was when I was actually able to quit my day jobs and move straight into the business of creating music,
Hello, singers. You're listening to Find Your Voice. Because when you find your voice, you find yourself. Here, you can find the best warm-up exercises, advice, and tips to sing like a pro and help you become the greatest singer you can be. I'm Melly, founder of Melly Music Lessons, a successful online music community that teaches you to sing freely and find your voice. Remember to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you find your podcasts, and join our vibrant community of singers. #FindYourVoice. This episode is brought to you by Singing in 3 Simple Steps, the only online course that will teach you how to sing freely. Visit mellymusiclessons.com for more details. The course starts at the end of the month. Can't wait to see you there. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another incredible webinar. We have Kacee today with us. She is a singer-songwriter, recording artist, stage actress, producer, and vocal and performance coach who has worked as a background vocalist for recording artists like Joe Cocker and Luis Miguel, and toured as lead vocalist with Big Brother and The Holding Company. She has also played Janis Joplin in the musical Love, Janis, and was on Broadway in the musical A Night with Janis Joplin. She was also a vocal and performance instructor at Los Angeles College of Music, which is how we met. Both her music and vocals have been used in a variety of films, TV shows, and video games. So without further ado, welcome, Kacee. How are you?
Man, that's a long list you just read. Does that mean that I've lived a long time?
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's up to you. But I know that you have a ton of, accomplishments, and they need to be just said.
It's so funny to me in the 90s, when I was, trying to get going in LA, and I was modeling and I was doing other things, but that wasn't my heart, And I was trying to come up with just one sheet that would list my, accomplishments. And I had things on there from college that I did, but I remember just struggling, and I would make the font bigger and bigger. So it would take up more space and come up with so much, stuff to put on there that it was real, but it wasn't really,
Sure.
It wouldn't be on a one sheet now. And now I struggle to do a one sheet. My one sheet is, it's maybe a third of my life, and it's in like a 6-point font, so I can shove everything on there. I never dreamed I'd reach that day.
That's amazing. I feel like we want to learn more about you and about your journey and about how that font became so small, because you have so much to tell us.
There's a T-shirt in there somewhere, right?
Yes, I definitely
dream of a smaller font.
Yeah, exactly. I love that, actually. That's pretty clever.
Me too.
So I wanted to just start from the beginning, Kacee. When you were a kid, did you always see yourself as a singer?
Yeah, I did. I was gratefully born into a musical family. So I was kind of surrounded, and, in church, there was so much music in church, and my mom sang, everybody sang in my family. My brother played a lot of piano and was classically training really pretty much my whole life. So I was sort of immersed in it from the time I was young. But I will tell you that I remember specifically the first time I heard Nat King Cole sing, and then Karen Carpenter. And I remember thinking, this is absolutely what I want to do, because of those two singers.
Wow.
They changed my life. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So as you grew up, what do you think was your first successful gig that you've ever had? Like when you started kind of believing in yourself and you're like, okay, I think I can do this.
Well, that came in phases, I would say. But I know in college, it was actually a dare. I was dared by some of my music friends to audition as the jazz vocalist because I really was not a jazz singer. And I got the position to sing jazz for my conservatory. And then I had to learn how to sing jazz. It was ridiculous. But so what I did was combined what I was good at, which was performance and, this wilder aesthetic. And I created this kind of jazz rock fusion band. And we had a 12-piece, I think it was, with a full horn section. I had background singers that we did choreography and the whole thing. And I remember opening for Doc Severinsen, who was the guy that led the band when Johnny Carson, do you know who that is? He was a big, he had the Tonight Show for many, many years. He started it. And Doc Severinsen ran the band. And so he played at our campus and we opened and it was an arena. And I remember thinking, I've really made it. I'm here on stage and it's an arena or whatever. And then it was like a long climb back up a hill to get to the next level. In 2001, in fact, just before 9/11, that's when I got my first theater role. Again, it fell in my lap because I wasn't into music theater. I was kind of drug into it and by a friend of mine. Her name's Beth Hart. Do you know Beth Hart? Yeah, she's a great rock singer and she was a friend of mine and she said, come on, you got to do this show with me. And she drugged me in kicking and screaming. And that was the launch of my theater career. And, but I would say the biggest moment where I said, this is it, I've done it. And now I can live full time as a singer was when I got my first Joe Cocker tour. That was when I was actually able to quit my day jobs and move straight into the business of creating music,
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so curious, like at the end, I know it was your friend that dragged you into musical theater, but like what made you say, okay, maybe I'll keep open to this opportunity? Like, because most people will be afraid and will shut that opportunity down and will say, that's not really what I'm going to go for. But you were, open enough to receive that.
I think a theme, and I would talk about this later if we talk about my advice to other singers. The theme of my whole life has been that everything I wished for and everything I planned for, none of it was going to really happen in the way that I saw it happening. And if I would have just put myself in that box of my own smaller dreams, then my career would have been over. When the doors opened, I'm not the kind of person that goes and bangs on doors. I just don't. I know some artists are like that. I don't judge that at all. And it gets people places, but I'm not that girl. I really like to kind of be zen about what comes to me and to have this feeling of peace about it. And then I just walk down that path, whenever it opens up. And I luckily was able to do that because what happened was far greater than what my little dreams were when I was young. My smaller dreams they were the fuel for it, but that's not what sustained me along the way. What sustained me was that, that patchwork living that I'm sure you and I have talked about. You gotta dip your hands in all these different buckets, and make it happen.
Sure. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to move into a touring artist that I really admire. And me being a Latina, I grew up listening to Luis Miguel, and my parents were like really mega fans, still to this date. How did you get to tour with him, and how was the experience? Take us a little bit behind the scenes.
So again, it was another like kismet story because I had come off the road with Joe Cocker and I was home in LA, and it was a while, like I wasn't getting other work, but right when I got off tour, we'd actually been on the road for, I want to say like 18 months, nonstop. And I was so tired. I was just exhausted. And I had flown into LA. I had jet lag. I got this phone call saying, hey, we're doing this rock opera at House of Blues, back when House of Blues still was in West Hollywood. And, we're trying to get producers to come and we're trying to sell the show. So we really love you to be part of the vocal ensemble that sings all the backgrounds and a bunch of the vocals. And I told my friend, I said, man, I am so tired. And because he was my friend, I said, okay. So I went in not with the greatest attitude because I was tired. It was a freebie. I wasn't getting paid. It was a favor to my friend. And I actually had a little bit of a bad attitude when I first walked in. I mean, I was friendly, but in my head, I was like, ugh, why can't you just say no? Why do you keep saying yes to these things? So fast forward, I'm working with all these Latina singers. And Cecilia Noel is doing the show, and different Latina artists were there. Sheila E. was there. I just was working with all these incredible Latina women. And during this production, there were some disagreements that happened in the vocal section, and I was staying quiet because I didn't know these people. I didn't know the show that well, and I was just learning. And eventually I ended up being kind of the leader because I was the only one that didn't have a vested emotional interest, and I could get everybody to come together. So I'm telling you all this because when I flash forward to 6 months later, I'm literally almost broke. I have no money left. I don't know if I have to go back to a day job. Life is getting very tough. I get a phone call from two of these girls saying, we're doing this tour with this artist named Luis Miguel, and you were so great in the show, and you were so calm, and you kept everybody together, and we really want you to come in and audition for this, and he's looking for a third person, and do you know who he is? I said, no. Which is inconceivable to me now that I know who he is, and now that I understand, how huge he is. I'd heard the name, and I remember saying, is it like Mexican polka music? Because that's not really my jam, So they invited me down to a rehearsal space. And what's funny is I wasn't supposed to know that he knew that I was there about the job. So I had to pretend that I was just a friend, and he was having to pretend that he didn't know that I was, it was so crazy. So I was like, you know what, forget this. And I just went over and I sat on the couch with him, and he poured me a glass of wine, and we shared a glass of wine. I said, so I don't know who you are. Tell me about you. And he just looked at me, and his manager looked at me. I'm like, what? I don't know. Who are you? And can you sing? I asked him if he could sing.
Oh my God.
He looks at me, he's like, can I sing? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe you suck. And he takes the mic and he goes up with the band, and he does some, heart-ripping ballad. And I'm sitting there with my wine. And I'm like, huh, wow. I didn't let him see that on my face, though. And he comes back and he sits down and he just looks at me, and I'm like, all right, yeah, you could sing. And he looks at me and he goes, you fascinate me. And that was not the first time or the last time he would say that to me. That was the first time, but that was not the last time.
That's amazing.
That was kind of our story for all the years I toured with him. I was always asking these ridiculous American white girl questions because I didn't know. I would meet these really famous people, and I had no idea who they were. And I'm just, innocent. I was like, so what do you do? Well, and then someone would tell me they're like one of the biggest songwriters in the entire Latin music market. Oh, great. And working with him, by the way, if I could go back in time, if I could take any job, I've ever had in my lifetime, that would be the one I would go back to.
Amazing.
That was my favorite, I think my favorite job. I mean, I'm touring with busloads of Mexicans. There is no way you don't have a good time. I've never laughed that hard in my life. And the food, and they would have family come on tour, and it was great. And Mickey is he's a big fan of funk. So when we would all hang out or go to dinner or whatever, he always had a stereo there that would play like great funk. And we'd all just, rock out to funk. When we played a lot of funk at sound checks. And so I was right in my element. And with the horn section and all that, it was definitely not polka. It was amazing music and I got to create a lot of the choreography. So I would study and I would talk to some of the dancers and I would learn, some wherever we were going, whatever country, we'd try to figure out what kind of dance they do and then incorporate it into the choreography. It was a blast.
Good. So what is something that you need to have to be a touring vocalist? Like, for example, when you tour with like Joe Cocker.
I think for any tour, I mean, whether it's theater or world tours or whether you're a club singer that works a lot, in my opinion, but particularly the higher you get, in the top tier touring world, you have to have a really, really strong work ethic, meaning that, the work is done before you walk in the room, meaning you exercise a great deal of vocal discipline and stamina. You have to do the work. You've got to do the warm-ups and the warm-downs. And I think the life of touring requires a sense of humor. Always. I don't think that people that take themselves very seriously will do that well on the road because the road gets really tough. It's a grind after a while. And people either love it or they don't thrive at all. I'm somebody who thrives on the road. I love living out of 2 suitcases I don't know where I'm going day to day. I just wake up and then I'm there. And I love that kind of lifestyle. But if you need to plan and have everything in order and all of that, it won't work as well. I think you have to exercise a ton of patience. That's what I learned. I've seen a lot of background singers crash and burn. And a lot of times it's because they weren't able to what I call fly under the radar. I'm very good at flying under the radar. Like I can be in a room and not be seen or heard. I can just be in the corner and learning, and I don't have to have the focus on me. I know when to shut my mouth. I didn't always know that. So I learned because I didn't do that very well.
That's pretty good advice.
Yeah.
I'd say. I don't know if I would have thrived as a background singer on the.
Yeah. I mean, you have to know when you take a gig like that, you are 100% expendable. You are literally the least important person there. And that is okay. You have to know that you have to be grateful that you are getting that paycheck. You get to do music for a living. Hopefully you get to sing behind somebody incredible. And I would sit there night after night, knowing full well that I could be fired at any minute. And I still would just marvel every night at how amazing the band sounded, how amazing the singer was, whatever. It's the power of the mind.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Good. So I want to talk a little bit about another part of your life that it's really kind of like interconnected in some way or another. So you were really on Broadway. Wow. You played Janis Joplin. Oh my goodness.
It's still a little surprising to me.
How on earth was that? Like, can you describe what was that? What was that to be like? Not only the training that you had to go through, but also like every night seeing all these people just come see you perform, this incredible artist that was difficult, vocally speaking. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, by the time we went to Broadway, I had been playing her for a number of years. So, Broadway really, in one way, It's another theater show. And for me, because I have stage fright, so I really have to deal with stage fright a lot. So I knew that I would be terrified. So my first show, that when I actually walked on stage and did my very first Broadway show, I just remember being backstage telling myself, this is another show, man, just do your show. There's nothing different. It's just a different location, a different city. You've done this a million times. So do your best, walk on there and give them every ounce of your blood. That's what you do every night. This is no different. And I literally was telling myself that all the way out onto stage. But there's no denying that there's an element of magic that doesn't exist elsewhere. It's Broadway, Broadway was never on my bucket list. I never even anticipated. And then on top of that, being a lead on Broadway was insanity. And I remember when I got the phone call asking me if I'd like to go to Broadway, I remember being in my hotel room because I was touring a regional run of the show before we went to New York. And I called my mom when I hung up and I said, you are not going to believe what just happened. And she's like, oh no, what? I said, they just called me to go to Broadway. Me. Like, what? And my mom just started laughing. We both just sat and laughed because it was ridiculously crazy.
It's so nice to hear this kind of like behind the scenes, not only the fact that you actually made it to Broadway and you did not expect that, because there's people who train their whole lives and like are never able to be on Broadway, but you made it just because, again, you stayed open, you were open to any other gig that presented itself, and because you were ready, right? You trained, and you were singing Janis.
I'm a super disciplined singer. And singing Janis was ludicrously difficult. It's probably, I would say it's the hardest role that's ever been written for a female theatrical singer. And the only reason, let's be real and honest, in total honesty, the reason I went to Broadway is because I could do it. In the theater world in general, but really in Broadway, it's a political world. I think if people have the aspiration to go to Broadway, understand that while you are developing your voice and your discipline, develop your savvy for politics, because you have to be able to walk some lines. There are some lines that exist between, the producers and the directors, the talent on stage, the crew, everything. It's you do have to be savvy, let's just say.
So does that mean you have to learn how to stand up for yourself?
That, and you have to, again, for me, what worked was to fly under the radar.
I want to talk a little bit about what happened after Janis. You got something called MTD, which is muscle tension dysphonia. For those who do not know what it is a change in the sound or the feel of your voice due to excessive muscle tension in and around the voice box. So can you walk us through this healing process, this healing journey, and why? Well, we discussed the warming up and cooling down is really important for you, but can you walk us through this? Can you talk a little bit about this?
Well, I think I can't really talk about the MTD without talking about the surgery that happened before that.
Oh, yes. Please go ahead.
Which this will be the first time I've ever talked about it publicly. Having surgery on your vocal cords, much less the kind of surgery I had, is pretty taboo to talk about in the singer, world. Nobody ever wants to say. There's so many singers I know that are professionals that have had surgery, but nobody wants to talk about it because they're afraid that people won't hire them or whatever. And they're right to be nervous. But the problem with that is, if we never talk about the problems we have vocally, we can never learn from each other and we can't support each other. I happened to, coming out of Janis, I knew something was wrong for a while. And I would go into all these ENTs. I get checked usually twice a year anyway, because I really like to see what's going on in my chords. And I went in, I would keep saying, there is something wrong. And they kept saying, we're not seeing anything. I'm like, look, and this is another thing for singers, know your vocal cords. Look at them every year and know exactly what they look like, because you will know more about your chords than they will. You know the progression of what's happening on your vocal cords. You know the feeling, you know what they're supposed to feel like. And when there's a problem, and if there is a problem, you have to advocate for yourself. And I had the Kaiser Medical. So they just didn't have any laryngologists that were really at the level that I sang at. And nobody was finding anything. I was told I had nodules. And I didn't have any of that. So finally, one of my vocal coaches, Sarah Lieb, who you know, she called me one day and she said, look, Lindsay Reeder, who's a surgeon, laryngologist and laryngeal surgeon, she just moved over to Kaiser from USC, and I think she's who you need to go see. So it just was divine that somebody at that level just happened to come into my healthcare situation. So I went and saw her, and she said, oh no, there's definitely something going on. And because of how hard I sang in Janis, when you get a polyp on your cord, it'll ridge up, right? So you can see it on the cord. The reason nobody saw it is because I was singing so hard, it had pushed the polyp into my cord. Literally, it was growing into my cord, and they had to dig in to take it out. So I had to have counseling before the surgery because she wouldn't do it without knowing that I was mentally and spiritually okay, because on the other side, there was potential I wouldn't have a voice. We went through the surgery, came out on the other side. It was during COVID, so I was alone at the hospital. My friend dropped me off at the curb, and I walked with my little backpack into the hospital by myself to have surgery that might end my whole career. It's 3 months maybe total of silence and not doing a whole lot of anything. And then talking again and learning how to speak again, because when you, on the other side of a surgery, you're like that, you start to speak and there's nothing. It sounds like this. It was so weird. I had been prepared, so I didn't freak out, but I had a great team. I had my speech therapist, my surgeon, and Sarah, and everybody worked with me for 6 months. And I learned to speak again. I learned to sing again. And within, I think, 4 or 5 months, I had 3.5 octaves. She said, I said it was muscle tension dysphonia. And then she had to explain to me, and she said, you know how many artists that, she's like, I can't even tell you who they are because I'm not supposed to, but so many artists that cancel tours have MTD. She said, it's very common for people who use their voice a lot. And it's my neck muscles work so hard when I talk, when I sing. You could probably see it now as I'm talking. They just tend to overwork. So they press really hard against like the smaller muscles and the smaller, real friable tissue that needs to come together. It's a very, fragile mechanism, our voice box and our larynx. So mine pushes so hard, I'm not able to phonate sometimes. So I had to start months of therapy all over again. And, you just have to do it. It's all laryngeal massage, and it's digging into your tongue muscle. Like if you push up under here with your thumbs really hard, if you have pain, that's your tongue. And your tongue, as singers, generally, and if you speak all day, generally your tongue will get super tight. So that's what happens.
I want to ask you, you're also a songwriter and producer, and you work in artist development. You've helped artists take it to the next level. You've helped them do songs, prepare themselves as artists. What does an artist need to have to kind of like be ready to work with you?
To work with me? I would say, firstly, they need to know in their bones that this is who they are. And that this is the life that they are willing to sacrifice for. Because being a full-time creative, there are things you end up sacrificing. And sometimes when you have to give it your all, you give it your all. So you have to be really focused on that and understand the truth of what it is to be a full-time artist. They, of course, need focus. They need discipline. I think most importantly, they need to trust me. So I need them to understand that while I'm their biggest cheerleader, I will also be their taskmaster. And I will be their harshest critic at times. And they have to understand and trust me and know that it's coming from a place of love, because I want to create amazing artists, amazing performers who are ready for the world and who will not just go out and deliver great art. I want to help them become great humans. So as they enter my industry that I've worked so hard to make better, that they are compassionate and they are grateful, humble people.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And for the people who, are tuning on YouTube, thank you for being here as well. And we'll see each other soon. Don't forget to follow Kacee and her adventures and journey. And we'll see each other soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining me today. You just became a better singer than yesterday simply by being here. There are always new episodes coming, so please follow me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leave me a 5-star review. It really helps me get in touch with more singers like you. Better yet, tell a friend. You can share this episode with them right now by clicking the share button. Thanks for being part of this musical community. Can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.